Welcome, Iowans for Freedom. We had a rally at the Capitol on the 5th, just 2 days ago. That was during the special session for the redistricting of the maps. A lot of people have asked questions about, what happened, what kind of progress we made. So I thought no better to answer that question than Representative Stephen Holt. He's been on the show before, and he's kind of right in the middle of the fight here and knows what's going on. So that's why we invited him on. Thanks, Steve, so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Oliver. It's great to be here.
Yep. So we were there at 8:30. We were there all day. I mean, we had 600 people there supporting you guys and trying to let the other legislators know that something needs to be done about these vaccine mandates. So can you kind of debrief us on what happened Tuesday?
Absolutely. And as I tried to tell folks before, special sessions are very unique. They're not like regular sessions. We don't have the kind of time and leverage to influence things in a special session like we do during a regular session. So the fact is, as most folks know, the Senate voted down the maps and they voted first. So that left the House in a position of not really even needing to do anything. We didn't even need to take a vote on the maps because even if we had voted to support them, they don't go anywhere because both chambers have to approve them and send them to the governor. So we basically simply gavelled in as we're required to do, and we adjourned. As I've said to folks before, we have two basic challenges going on as it relates to vaccine mandates. First, we have the Biden mandates that have thus far only been a press release where he says he's going to mandate that businesses that employ over 100 people have to require the vaccine, and that he's going to require nursing homes and other medical facilities to mandate the vaccine to their employees, or he's going to deny them federal funding. So we have that issue. Republicans are absolutely united on pushing back against that and stopping that. You will see once any of these orders are actually published, you're going to see 20 or more states, 25 states immediately sue the federal government over that. Iowa will be one of them. We also potentially are going to push back legislatively on that as well.
Yeah, I saw that Zach Nunn had introduced or tried to introduce a bill making it so OSHA couldn't do that. Could you explain that?
Yeah, and I really love Senator Nunn's approach. What his legislation does is it basically, and I've got it right here, so I will read part of it, but what it does is it prohibits the labor commissioner in Iowa from implementing, enforcing, or conforming to any federal occupational safety and health standard, OSHA standard relating to COVID-19 that would require an employer to carry out certain actions relating to COVID-19. In other words, it would prevent the labor commissioner in Iowa from enforcing Biden's mandates on businesses with COVID-19.
And that's what his intention was to use that arm to enforce that.
Absolutely. And I think that potentially will get widespread support from my fellow Republicans, because as I said, I think we're united in wanting to push back against those mandates. Though the area where we do not yet have consensus is in the area on the other side of it, which is telling businesses they cannot mandate it. So we do have that core group of individuals who or a group of individuals who believe that we shouldn't tell businesses what to do on either side of this. We shouldn't tell them they have to mandate the vaccine, but we also shouldn't tell them that they can't mandate the vaccine. There's probably 40 legislators, Republican legislators, who want to stop businesses from being able to mandate the vaccine based upon the idea that we believe it's a civil rights issue. And that is the one area in which government oftentimes dictates to businesses, which is in the area of civil rights. But there are those good folks who believe we shouldn't get involved and we should let the business owners decide that. So that is the area that we do not have consensus.
So Steve, a lot of times people tell us we need to change the hearts and minds of those other people, those other Republican legislators that we hope to get on board. How do we do that?
Well, I think one of the ways, the rally yesterday, I was so heartened and encouraged to see all those folks out there standing up for their freedoms. We certainly cannot do it alone in the legislature. And so it's great to have seen those 600 people. You need to let your state representative know where you stand, your state senator, your congressman in Washington, and your senators in Washington. That you can contact the governor's office. And I think everybody should ask their state representatives and their senators where they stand on this. And sort of pin us to the wall on it. Where do you stand? Do you believe that businesses should be allowed to mandate the vaccine? I think that is the way that we move forward and are ultimately. I've seen a lot of issues over the years that we start out not having 51 votes and eventually we get there. It can be very frustrating for folks because I know they want action in a much quicker way, and I know that people are being terminated in a heartbreaking way, and that is profoundly disturbing for me. I mean, I lose sleep over it overnight. Every night, but we do have the Iowa Civil Rights Commission, which I think has a number of complaints related to religious exemptions being denied, and that I think that process is going to play out in the months to come. I hope in an effective way for those folks who applied for those exemptions. So there are encouraging things going on, and there's a lot of folks. Representative Jeff Shipley, myself, Representative Henry Stone, Representative Skylar Wheeler, Representative Sandy Salmon. There's a lot of folks that are working hard on this issue to try to get something done, and will continue to do so.
Yeah, and I know that the Civil Rights Commission has received a number of complaints and people that have filed in September. So that's good. I mean, it's gone way up. And I know that you guys have talked with the Civil Rights Commission about potentially a change in the code, maybe even having a new protected class. I know that I talked to Senator Garrett, and I know there was some concern about Medicare and how Medicare could be affected. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Sure, and let me go back to your point. The Iowa Civil Rights Commission, let me make clear, that's an independent commission, and
Right.
their responsibility is to do what they do within enforcing the Iowa Civil Rights Code. They also, from time to time, I think, have given recommendations on what changes might be necessary, and that is what might happen in the future. I have not had any specific discussions yet related to that particular issue, but I have spoken to the commissioners regarding, and I did sit in on the call when the Iowa Civil Rights Commission was meeting. Now, with regard to the Biden threat that he's going to withhold funding from medical facilities through CMS. Again, that's within the Biden mandates. That's sort of a separate issue from the OSHA, what he says he's going to mandate to businesses under 100 employee or over 100 employees that they have to mandate the vaccine. And I think that's just the beginning of it. I think ultimately he's going to say every business has to do it if he succeeds in doing it with 100 and above. So that's one issue. And we believe that he doesn't constitutionally have the right to do that through OSHA. So he'll be challenged in court. We may well also put legislation in place to try to block it in Iowa. So we have a lot of different firewalls. On the issue of CMS, it's a different fight because the argument can be made that the federal government gets to decide how they spend their money. And if the federal government all the time puts all sorts of strings to funding and hoops that you have to jump through in order to get that funding. For instance, with highway funding, they have requirements related to union organizations and pay scales and all those sorts of things. So they put strings on money all the time. This would be yet another string, basically coercion, saying to facilities, if you don't, mandate that your employees get the vaccine, then you're going to be denied funding through CMS. That would devastate and shut down nursing homes. It would devastate and shut down a number of hospitals. So it is definitely a threat that carries a lot of weight were it to be followed through on. That's something we have to handle differently than, for instance, the OSHA situation, because again, it is about how the federal government chooses to spend the money that it has collected from American taxpayers. I think that fight will more likely have to be fought out in court as opposed to legislation we might be able to adopt, but we will be taking a look at that. I would call people's attention a few years ago, Republicans in the House and Senate and the governor made the decision we weren't going to give funding to family planning organizations that conduct abortions, such as Planned Parenthood. We passed that. We were sued in court and we won because the state, through their elected representatives, we get to decide how the taxpayers' money is spent. So I hope that is not a similar outcome on the federal level, but I just want to make folks aware that that's two different issues that are going to have to be handled very differently.
Sure. Yeah, and that makes sense. And I think you mentioned that you're putting a bill together.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
and I don't want to take credit for something that's not mine. So let me,
Co-sponsoring a bill.
yeah, I'm a co-sponsor of a bill with Representative Henry Stone. It was Representative Henry Stone's bill. I like the bill a lot. It is in drafting right now. And what his bill would do is prohibit an employer from discriminating against an employee with respect to compensation or the terms, conditions, or privileges of employment because the employee declines to receive a vaccine for COVID-19 or to provide proof of receiving such a vaccine. So in other words, it would create $1,000 fine per employee per incident for those who are discriminated against relating to the COVID vaccination status. Now, the problem we're going to have with this or any other piece of legislation is also how we respond to the Biden mandates. Because if a business is put in the position of being, on one hand, the state saying you cannot do this, on the other hand, the federal government saying if you do not do this, you'll be fined X amount per employee, then what is the business supposed to do? The business is between a rock and a hard place in terms of what do they decide to do? Comply with state law or comply with federal law? And that'll end up playing out in the courts. I think courts are going to have to decide whether this is a states' rights type issue and the state law prevails or whether the federal government gets to prevail. So there's so many unknowns here. We're sort of in unprecedented territory in this regard. So we want to put up as many barriers as we can and see what happens. Again, I would say the bill that I'm co-sponsoring, Representative Stone, I want to make clear that is the area in which we do not yet have consensus within our caucus, because again, there are those folks who believe that we should not legislate on either side of this issue, that we should allow businesses to decide. But that is something some of us are going to push for. Representative Shipley has bills that would accomplish similar things.
Right.
Different approach. So.
Right. So, and it's good to know that we have freedom fighters like you and in our legislator working on this legislation. And when do you think, okay, so the 5th, they voted down the maps.
Right.
When do you guys come back to revisit that?
Well, that is completely up to the governor, but the Legislative Services Agency has announced that they will have the new maps to us by the 21st. By law, there's supposed to be 7 days between then and when to allow for public comment or whatever, and when we go into special session. So if you do the math, that would put us around October 28th.
Okay.
That's a Thursday that conceivably the governor could make the decision to call us into special session. So it could be around the 28th of October. That would be the date that we would convene us for the second special session to look at the second set of maps.
Okay. And of course, we'll show up. We'll support you guys.
Absolutely.
So at that point, will your legislation be ready? The bill that you're co-sponsoring?
Yeah. It's difficult to tell. I think probably the answer to that would be yes, but whether we would have the consensus during special session to do that particular piece of legislation remains to be seen. As I said, that is the area we don't have consensus. I might be a little more optimistic that we might be able to do something related to the federal mandates that I think we are united on, and that we might want to make a strong, not only a statement, but a strong response to the Biden mandates by blocking OSHA in the state by using the approach in Senator Nunn's bill. Again, it all remains to be seen. I'm not going to make any predictions, but certainly we're far more united in that area than we have work to do to get consensus on the consensus in the other area of stopping businesses from being able to mandate the vaccine. That may well be something, frankly. I mean, I have to be honest with folks. Special session again doesn't allow us a lot of time, a lot of leverage, a lot of opportunity to do things that we're not united on. And it's a very different than when we have a regular session in which we have plenty of time to talk to one another and work things out. And so we'll just have to see what happens.
So what would your message be to those 11 legislators that you need to get on board, that, to change their hearts and minds about this issue? Because you've obviously changed yours a little bit. You've seen that there's a lot bigger issues, and some of the free market didn't take care of things like we would hope.
Right.
What would you say to those people and those legislators?
Yeah. Well, then let me clarify that. I started out with the vaccine passport bill my position was that I did not want anybody to be able to mandate the vaccine, businesses or government, because I thought it was
Okay.
a rights issue. And I've said that consistently. What I also did say was we did not have the votes to accomplish that. We did have the votes to restrict government from being able to mandate the vaccine on any level, state, county, city. We also had the votes to basically say to businesses, if you mandate the vaccine to your customers, then you're going to lose state grants, state contracts. What we didn't have the votes to do, and we still don't have the votes to do, frankly, is to tell businesses flat out they cannot mandate the vaccine to their employees. So that has remained. And I did say during the floor debate that I hoped that the free market would take care of this. And I think what we're seeing is, based upon my discussions with business leaders in this state, is that the free market probably would be taking care of this, absent of the coercion we're seeing
Right.
from the government. The fact is that almost every business leader I've spoken to said we have no intention of mandating this vaccine. However, obviously, if the federal government says we have to, then we have to. The same way is true with these companies such as Collins Aerospace, as an example, that have contracts with the federal government. If they don't do it, then they stand to lose millions of dollars worth of contracts and go out of business. Now, if you're a freedom-loving American, you might be, willing to say, you know what? The greatest generation fought and died on the beaches of World War II at Tarawa and Iwo Jima and Peleliu and Okinawa and on the beaches of Normandy. And it's not too much to give up to say, you know what, federal government, you can go take a hike. We're not going to violate the freedom of our employees. I would love to see more business leaders stand up and take that approach, because frankly, if they did, we wouldn't have this problem. However, they're not going to do that, I would suspect. And so we have to work maybe to respond to that in a different way. I represent 31,000 people, just like all the other legislators do. And we all have a right to decide what we believe is best for our constituents and, based upon our core beliefs. So I don't know if it's 11, I don't know if it's 15. I would simply say we have to continue to work to try to understand that this is a civil rights issue. 2 times during the last few years, I have written a bill and it passed unanimously or nearly unanimously on the floor of the House that prevented employers from mandating that or coercing employees on having microchips inserted into their bodies. Now,
Right.
folks,
Right.
when folks first looked at that, they thought, why are you doing this? Well, it's because I was trying to be preemptive, because I saw in some other states that there were businesses sort of trying to coerce or persuade their employees through bonuses and stuff like that to get these microchips inserted in their bodies because it was cheaper for them than having IDs and things of that kind. So I didn't want that to start in Iowa. So I put that legislation forward. It passed almost unanimously twice. So how in the House, it never has been taken up in the
So
Senate.
it's funny you say that, because this isn't a far stretch from that.
Well, that's my point exactly. So to folks that say, well, we don't want to mandate to businesses, but wait a minute, you just voted unanimously to mandate to businesses that they're not allowed to coerce or offer incentives or force employees to have a microchip. How is this any different? Well, the difference really is when it comes to this particular situation with COVID, there is a clear and pressing need here for this legislation for those folks who do not believe it is safe and who do believe they want to make their own personal health care choices, as compared to the just sort of preemptive strike we were trying to do with microchips when there really isn't a problem in Iowa. There really is a problem in Iowa right now with the COVID-19 vaccine. So it is a little frustrating when you think about the fact that people say, well, we don't want to mandate to businesses, but they were okay with passing the microchip bill, which is a mandate that businesses cannot force the microchip to be inserted. Some of these folks are also okay with mandating a certain kind of fuel in order to, assist the ethanol industry. And believe me, ethanol is very important to Iowa. I'm not saying we should not find ways to support the ethanol industry. I'm just saying it seems that sometimes folks are completely okay with mandates, and in this situation, they don't seem to be. And so
I wonder if that's partly, and also, I heard somebody speak to a Senate, a PhD in chemistry and biology, and she talked about how we need to be making policies based on what these shots actually do, not on what we would hope they would do. And,
Right.
now we're finding, okay, if you have the shot, you can still get and spread the virus. So it seems like the policy of a business would be in hopes that you wouldn't spread the virus if you got it. But now we know, I mean, we've had all sorts of studies and examples that you're just as likely or, very likely to be able to get and spread it. So I don't understand. Does do legislators still believe that somebody that's had the vaccine can't get and spread the virus?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but I can certainly say that that what you said just hits the nail on the head. It's inexplicable to me that we have all these policies and mandates that don't seem to follow common sense and don't seem to follow the science. It has been clearly stated by the CDC director and others that the science shows, the data shows that somebody that is vaccinated against COVID can still carry the virus to somebody else, just like the unvaccinated can. Therefore, a person who is unvaccinated is no more of a threat to anyone than somebody that is unvaccinated. And so it really makes no sense whatsoever that you would mandate the vaccine if that is your purpose, that you're trying to keep
Right,
everybody
right.
safe, which I keep hearing people say that, but it's not accurate. And so it, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those inexplicable things about COVID that just doesn't pass the common sense test. Just like if you believe masks work, then wear the mask. Why are you so hell bent on forcing other people to wear the mask? If you believe in the vaccinations, get vaccinated. Why are you so hell bent on making sure everybody else is vaccinated when, in fact, whether they're vaccinated or not, they can still carry the virus around? So
Right.
it's one of those things that if you sit down and think it through, none of this makes very much sense.
Exactly. It should be a personal choice, a conversation with you and your doctor. Somebody who's weighed the pros and cons and the risks, that's their choice. So,
Absolutely.
absolutely. So, what's the next step?
Well, the next step is we're continuing to work on legislation. The one thing I would say is that I'm hoping that we can move decisively first on the things we do agree on, which is stopping the Biden mandates, taking a strong stand against those mandates. I know we will do that in court, but perhaps we should also do it with legislation. I think that's something that can happen very, very quickly, because we do have, I think, complete agreement in that area. We may not have agreement yet on the proper approach, but we have complete agreement on the need to push back against those. And so that is the first area that we could make progress on. The other things is that we have to continue, the legislators that believe we have to do something and stop the mandating of the vaccine have to continue to work for consensus. We have to continue to have conversations with those who do not agree with us as we work to try to find a solution that would get us across the finish line with 51. We also have to continue. I would again continue to encourage people, please file those exemptions. And if you are denied the exemption, file a complaint with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. That is the process we have in place right now that may be able to help protect folks as we go through this process. And I hate to say it, but there's been a lot of times in our history where freedom-loving people have had to stand up and make sacrifices, and there've been young people who have dropped out of nursing programs. We're going to have an amazing healthcare worker shortage down the road because of all of this, and folks are going to individually have to make their own decisions as Americans as we work through this on how much they're willing to sacrifice. I suppose this is a tragic thing for me, but government, state government is not going to be the entire solution. We all, as freedom fighters, are going to have to stand up and figure out and pray and be discerning about what our parts are in this process as well.
And that kind of answers my next question is, what would your message be to the average person watching this, the Iowan that doesn't feel like their voice matters? They're between a rock and a hard place. They're on the verge of being coerced into something they don't want to do. I mean, what would you say to them?
It's heartbreaking to me, but your voices are being heard. There's a number of us who are fighting just as hard as we can to figure out how we can stop this, to figure out how we can find consensus and get to 51 and stop businesses from mandating the vaccine and a lot of people from losing their jobs. And I think this will I hope become easier as the free market recognizes that we've got businesses all over the place right now that are closing down or not their normal hours or not fully open because they cannot get employees. I was just in a restaurant in Des Moines a few nights ago and it was half open because they don't have enough employees to work all the tables. And so all of these things I hope will bring enough pressure to bear that this stuff is stopped. But I got to tell you, I think we all have to be very prayerful. What I see on the federal level is a level of overreach and a level of being willingness to weaponize the federal government, every agency in the federal government, and demonize people in a way that is unprecedented in my 63 years of life. Look, we've got the Department of Justice that now is okay with Black Lives Matter burning up our cities all over the country, but they're going to identify parents that are opposed to critical race theory as domestic terrorists, basically. It's an insane period of time that we're living in, and patriots have got to stand up with courage as our greatest generation did and fight back in every way possible to secure our freedoms and our liberty. I think it's still important to use the system we have in place, because just because it's slower than some of us want it to be doesn't mean in the end that it will not be effective at combating this. There's a lot of steps in the process, a lot of things going on behind the scenes, both on the legislative level and as we prepare to challenge a lot of this stuff in court.
I met a family at the rally or the event on the 5th that moved from Seattle because of all the crazy things going on in there. And they are going on there and they moved to Iowa. They've been here 4 months and they love it. I mean, I do believe that Iowa is one of the freest places in the nation.
Yeah.
And a lot of, people are leaving other cities and states in droves.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
do need to keep it up.
Yeah, one of the things I would point out is that, several years ago in California, they got rid of the religious exemption, I believe. I'm correct in that. And so there are a lot of reasons to rejoice for the state we live in, because even though we may not be, I would like to respond way quicker in certain of these situations than we have thus far, but that we have so many things in place in our civil rights code and so many things in place that have stood up for freedom and liberty in this situation. It is way different than a lot of other states like California, like New York, where they've just fired 300 nurses, I think, or 400, and they're hiring National Guard and nurses from the Philippines and other places. And in Iowa, I'm at least happy to report that one of our major healthcare systems granted nearly every exemption that was requested, and they have not been hassling those folks. And so there are a lot of good news points as we continue to go through this. And that demonstrates, at least in that case, that the system did work for these folks. They requested exemptions. The exemptions were granted, 800 out of 809. I would love to know why the other 9 were not, but I'm not privy to that information. But 800 of those exemptions were granted. And in having some conversations with some of those that were granted exemptions, they said, no, we have not been harassed in any way. We're not being required to do anything that every other employee is not doing. So there is some good news stuff going on, and we're going to continue to push back. And I hope that as we do that, businesses will become more and more courageous at standing up and saying, no, we're not going to mandate this vaccine. We're going to wait and see what happens as the state sort of fights it out with the federal government.
That's important. And I want to encourage our members and viewers and the members of all our other freedom groups. I want to encourage them to show up. And could you speak to how important that is when we show up?
Oh Lord. I mean, the more the better. I mean, when you have 600 there, it's great. If you have 1,500 there, it's even better. I mean, the more people that stand up now, the thing is, this is what I mean by choices that all of us have to make. Because if we don't choose to stand up now, we may not be able to stand up later. That's certainly indicative of a lot of places where freedom has been lost. It was a lot easier to stand up early on, and then there becomes a point where it's almost impossible to stand up without losing everything, including possibly your life. And so I think this is a a time for all of us to stand up and let our voices be heard loud and clear in a nonviolent way always, because we're in a country where we still have a lot of systems in place in spite of how things are looking. I think for many of us, we look at our country and it's hard to recognize it right now, but we still have a lot of systems in place. We still have a constitution. We still have a Bill of Rights, and we still have a lot of those things in place for which we can continue to fight within the system to try and address all of these issues and concerns we have about our liberty and freedom. And I would also, again, want to give a shout out to all those freedom fighting legislators. And there's no way I'm going to, remember all of the names, but, we've got Sandy Salmon, we've got Jeff Shipley, we've got Terry Baxter, we've got Skylar Wheeler, we've got Henry Stone, we've got John Jacobson, we've got, and I'm sure there's others, Sandy Salmon. I mean, I'm going to forget somebody, but there's Mark Cisneros. We've got a lot of folks that are fighting the good fight, doing our best to try to make something happen. And so the other thing I think it is important for folks to understand, they want us to make things happen, and they can get angry at us but folks have to understand we're one of 100 legislators, and we have to get to 51. And no matter how much we want it to happen immediately, just like they do, we have to work within the system, and we have no ability to force someone else to vote a certain way. So we just have to be prayerful and continue to do our due diligence and do our best to make it happen. But their presence and voices could not be more important than right now.
Yes, for sure. I saw you at the Faith and Freedom event. You did an incredible job with the ceremony for our lost soldiers in
Thank you.
Afghanistan. It was
Thank
very
you.
heartfelt and amazing. And somebody who spoke said, if not you, then who? If not now, then when?
Yeah.
And that's a message for every single Iowan. Now is really the time to draw the line in the sand and stand up, support our legislators like Senator Holt or Representative Holt and all the people he named, all those legislators that are fighting for our freedom. We need to show up to support them, and then to let the other legislators know that, hey, it's okay to jump on board. It's okay to fight for our freedoms. And I would love, we're going to keep everybody posted as soon as we hear when the next session is. You said it could be around the 28th of October, but we want to let everybody know. So if you're watching this, text the word freedom to 888-702-1791. I'll put it in the description. That's 888-702-1791. Text the word freedom, and we'll let you know as soon as we know. Then we can bypass the Facebook junk. Then we can, get right to people. So please do that. Is there anything you'd like to leave folks with today? Representative Holt, I really appreciate your time and jumping on here to help us understand what's going on.
Just to say that, you mentioned the ceremony for the 13 heroes that were killed in Afghanistan. And this is why I remain optimistic and committed that we will win this fight, because we are not going to let those folks down. The poem in Flanders Fields comes to mind, where the poet, who was actually an Army officer in the Canadian military, talks about how we cannot let these folks down whose bodies are lying under the poppies at Flanders Fields, and we cannot. I mean, that is what is at stake here. Our freedom is at stake, and I think in jeopardy right now, in a way that is every bit as real as if we were fighting on the battlefield. It's just that this time, instead of a foreign foe, things are happening from within our own country that need to be addressed. And so folks have to stand up, they have to pray, and they have to be willing to be brave and stand up in this situation as I know many of them are. And my prayers certainly go out to all the folks that have contacted me that are worried about losing their jobs, that are worried about how they're going to feed their children. It's real easy to talk about taking a stand, but if you lose your income, how are you supposed to feed your children? How are you supposed to take care of your family? It's not an easy decision. I'm not suggesting in any way it is, and nobody should have to make that decision. That's what's so frustrating in this situation. And so we're going to continue to work just as hard as we can. And I look forward to seeing all these folks that are watching continuing to fight for their freedom.
Yeah, and that would be an awesome place to end this. But I do want to ask you about the ceremony. Can Can you tell me about, it was very, you had your military dress on. What's your military experience? Can you explain that ceremony to us? I mean, we all stood 1,000 people and watched you salute these young men that whose lives were lost, and you tipped a chair for each one around it. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I spent 20 years in the Marine Corps, from 1976 to 1996. I was a drill instructor for 5 years. I was blessed, if that's the right word, during my time in the Marine Corps. It was a fairly peaceful time frame in our nation's history. There weren't a lot of wars. There were small things going on. The Grenada incident took place during President Reagan's presidency. That was very small in nature. And then the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, happened toward the end of my 20 years. But I saw a lot of Marines die in peacetime. People don't understand oftentimes that there's a lot of risk even in a peacetime military. And I watched 19 Marines get on a helicopter during exercises off the coast of Camp Lejeune. I was in a Harrier squadron, and I watched that helicopter take off and suddenly go down and hit the water, turn upside down, and disappear underneath the ocean. And it was in the pre-dawn hours of an amphibious exercise. 19 Marines, as I recall, the number passed away that day, along with the Navy chaplain that was on that helicopter. I think there was one or two survivors, and we spent the entire day bringing up the bodies of those fallen Marines. So there's risk in peacetime and in war. That ceremony comes a little bit from. I've never seen that particular ceremony done before. I was honored to be a part of it, but it comes from the missing man table that is at every Marine Corps ball that I've ever attended. The Marine Corps birthday is November 10th every year, and I'm sure maybe the other services do the same thing. I don't know. I can just speak to the Marine Corps, but there's always a table within that birthday celebration. There's always a table set for the fallen Marine, for the one that couldn't be there because they gave their lives for the country. So that ceremony derived, I think, came from that concept in which you set up the table for the 13 that could not be with us. And so that is where the ceremony came from. I made the decision to salute each one because I thought it was just absolutely appropriate that
Wow.
each one can be saluted. But I had never seen that specific ceremony before, but I do believe that's where it has its roots.
Sure. Well, thank you for your service and for serving Iowans, for serving our country. My dad was a Marine and a Korean War veteran. So, I have a bit of a history there with that, but I appreciate your service, and I appreciate everything you're doing for Iowans right now. So we want to support you. Keep up the good fight. Check out Freedom Watch. Uh, Steve has his own show, so sometimes he gets on there and speaks to current things that are going on, and it's fantastic. So thanks again, Steve. And I can't I look forward to speaking with you again and seeing how this comes along. So
Thank you, Oliver. It's great to be here with you today.
yep. Iowans for Freedom. Have a blessed day, and we will definitely see you next time.